So I've got a story to share, and it's definitely a strange one, and it's not often that I talk publicly of my psychedelic use, but this particular experience I felt was more important. No, I don't know if I can even say that. This particular experience was so out of the ordinary that I feel compelled to share it. Maybe that's the right way to say it. So, some context. I first tried psychedelics when I was 18 years old, and I was on the brink of suicide. Essentially, it was, if I'm willing to kill myself, I'm willing to try psilocybin, because what have I got to lose, right? So I did. And I actually wrote a song about that particular experience, which I'll leave down in the information there. But it changed my life forever, which is strange to say, because it was in that very pit of depression that drugs had brought me there. And here it was that a different kind of drug was bringing me out. Anyway, so fast forward a couple years, I've tried psilocybin, mescaline, LSD, DMT, the works. I've had incredible experiences, frightening ones that lasted 8 minutes but felt like hours. But lingering in the back of all these experiences, there was one that a man, Terrence McKenna, had always spoken of. And at first I thought it was kind of a joke, but the more I looked into people like Terrence McKenna and Timothy Leary and Alan Watts, I think he was serious, but I was nowhere near confident enough to take his challenge, and his challenge was this: 5 dried grams in silent darkness, which is to say that you would take 5 grams of psilocybin and sit in a completely dark room with no music, no friends, no sounds, no lights, just your being. Which seems daunting if you've ever experienced a psychedelic. They are rather powerful, especially if you deny yourself things to focus on, such as a festival when you're at a show, or playing instruments. You can sort of play with the psychedelic at that point. But when you deprive the psychedelic of something to do, it will play with you. So, that being said, I did it. I did 5 dried grams in silent darkness. So, this is going to be a jumbled story because the memory that I have from this night, this was 2 nights ago, I just finished sleeping for like 25 hours, which is strange, but I feel good. I feel purged. Physically and emotionally purged. Which is perhaps the reason you do that sort of thing. So, it began quite pleasant, actually. I was sitting in the darkness. I had just finished eating the greatest mistake of my life, which was an incredibly spicy Mexican dish, followed by a large chocolate peanut butter cup flurry. So, both very hard on the stomach, and then ingesting 5 grams of psilocybin to follow that was probably not a good idea. But I did it. It started off nice. I was laying down in my bed, and I was feeling rather sexually stimulated, actually. I remember touching myself and thinking, well, this isn't so bad. Like, this is pretty great. If this is going to be the whole trip, like, I'm glad I did this. Then as that went on, there was this sort of creeping feeling and a kind of distracting feeling, to the point where I could feel my libido sort of shrink away because this feeling was so much greater than sexual stimulation. It started off as this sort of sonic boom in my head where my ears almost filled with pressure, and it was sort of like all the sounds in the world siphoned toward me, and it was like a and then I was back. I was, I could hear things again. I was aware. It was this split second, like, I don't know. And that happened once, and then I went back to pleasuring myself, and then it happened again, and again, and again, and it started getting more frequent. And then after that is when things started getting very fuzzy. There was a point in time where I remember pacing in and out of my room, and it's all dark, and I was very warbly, kind of stumbling. You lose lots of motor skills on psilocybin. It's a common effect. But every time I would exit my room, I remember being in this panic of, like, oh my gosh, everything I used to be, everything I used to have, everything I used to know is gone. It's past me. I can't go back to those wonderful things and wonderful places. So I remember pacing out of my room, and I would return into this room here, but the furniture would be arranged in a way that it was years ago. At one point, I remember even walking in, and my ex-girlfriend was sitting there laying on a bed that I don't even own anymore. And then I would realize, I'd be like, no, this isn't right. This isn't my room. And I'd exit again, and I'd come back in, and the room would be different. Never have I had an experience where I was actively apparating a world around me. I think that may only be possible because I had completely deprived myself of sight and sound, and I was existing in darkness on this insane mind trip. Anyway, that sort of past panic was interrupted by my body having the unwillful urge to just I was in the bathroom a lot. Spare the details, I was in there often, and the harder I was expelling things from my body, the harder I began to trip. And I just remember going up and down the stairs to the bathroom. It felt like maybe 8 to 10 times. And I wasn't nauseous, and I didn't feel sick, but I felt a sickness inside of me. Sometime later, I ended up back upstairs in the darkness, and I remember a point where I was sitting by my window over there, and there was just a bit of moonlight coming in, which made this half of the room sort of real. It was still very dark. I didn't have my glasses on, tripping balls, so nothing over here I could really see, but I knew, like, okay, there's some tangible shapes and objects, so that's real over here. That's real. Thanks, moon. But when I would turn to face that side of the room, where the moonlight was not hitting, it was this pure sheen black wall, like just so absolutely dark. And there was a time where I was looking back and forth between the moonlit area and the dark area, and when I would look over here, things felt sort of real, and when I would turn around, I was immediately in this dreamy like space. I actually drew a horrible little sketch of it, but it reminded me of sort of like maybe a cross between Warhammer Fantasy and Dishonored sort of city. It was cobbled, there was big fanciful windows, but it didn't go away. Every time I would look over here where the moonlight was, I would look back and it was still there. It was like I had access to this street that felt familiar, but I've clearly never seen before. When that moment was happening, I remember surrounding that moment, there were also flashes of this dream space, as I describe it. For context, every night for the last, I would say 3 months, I have dreamt about the same location. And I have a journal on the table over there where I write down the mornings that I remember and the date, and I draw and write down as much as I can remember from that dream. I've come to calling it the Isle of I, because I'm pretty sure it's sort of an allegory to my own subconscious and what I'm going through in life. A lot of the events in this dream space have lined up with the events in my life. I really noticed these dreams come to fruition when I actually got rid of my bed, and I sleep on the floor now so that I sleep more lightly, and I'm able to sort of remember more clearly the dreams that I'm having, as opposed to when you're wickedly comfortable in like a soft bed, you're zonked out, you cannot like possibly wake up. So with that context, during my 5-gram experience in the darkness, I was being put into that dream space. But the weirdest part was I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't dreaming. So it was the opposite way around. I wasn't visiting my dreams. My dreams were seemingly visiting my bedroom. As I'm sitting here, as I'm looking around in the blackness, it was like the darkness would sort of break away in certain sections, almost if it was like a wall crumbling, and I could see through that crumbling wall, and there would be scenes that I clearly recognized from this dream space. I don't know how else to explain an experience like that other than I got the opportunity to exist into my subconscious. However, the price was shitting my brains out all night, sleeping for 25 hours, feeling a little bit stupefied. I don't know if I'd do it again. I really don't. Maybe recommend it to an aspiring psychonaut, but don't take an experience like this lightly. You need to really know yourself before you dive into something like that. So after I had this cool experience where I was sort of tasting my dreams, it got even fuzzier, the memory of the trip, I mean. I remember a time where I was behind me there in my closet, upside down on a beanbag, sort of blowing my nose into dirty laundry, because I don't know why I was crying so hard. I was bawling my eyes out. I was wailing. And then I sort of came to out of my insanity, if you would, and was like, what the hell am I doing? Put the clothes back in the laundry bin, crawl out of the closet. I remember standing in my room, and by this time I should say that I turned a lamp on. I was 4 hours into the darkness. I was feeling absolutely crazy. I turned a light on. I just needed to like touch base with reality again. I felt that 4 hours was plenty of time. And I spent a lot of time with my cat, and had another very strange moment. I was laying and staring into his eyes, and then I realized that I could see myself literally inside of his eyes. I could see myself inside of him. And that sort of translates to an allegory of empathy, being able to see yourself in another being, to empathize with them. But not only in that spiritual way, but to physically see your reflection inside of their eyes. I don't know why that like broke me. That realization when I was tripping that hard, I felt shattered. I felt like I don't know, it felt so important, and it just makes me laugh now. I wrote it down in a little book, but well, bless my cat, I guess. After that, I was sort of circling around my room, feeling batshit crazy. I remember just looking at things in my room and just laughing. Nothing was funny. I truly think all the times I laughed during that experience was a coping mechanism in my own head to make light of the true insanity that it felt like. What else can you do but laugh when reality itself doesn't seem to make sense? Yeah. So, thanks, Terrence McKenna. It was a great time.